What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch here with AC, Dilly Vanilli, and the one, the only Kevin Olenek. We are here to preview the Philadelphia Eagles, the world champion Philadelphia Eagles. There, I got that in for you, AC. So it's interesting with the Eagles because we've seen a lot of teams that have won the Super Bowl, and we haven't seen a repeat champion for quite some time. But it looks like the Eagles are set up to kind of go in that direction, at least contend for another title this season in the NFL. They pretty much have the same roster from last year. Of course, they did win the Super Bowl with Carson Wentz on the sideline, Nick Foles in the huddle on the field. So Nick Foles kind of took them to that promised land after Carson Wentz set it up for him. Carson Wentz should be back for the start in week 1. He's pretty much recovering right now, getting limited reps in training camp. So we'll see how that progresses throughout preseason, and hopefully he'll be back on the field in MVP form like he was last year. Pretty much in terms of additions and stuff, I mean, they added Michael Bennett from Seattle. They added Haloti Ngata, another veteran on the defensive line, who's been a great player throughout his career, but he's okay now. The rest of their defense, I mean, they got rid of Michael Kendricks. But again, it's pretty much the same offense, same defense. Again, Jason Peters back at left tackle. They basically traded Torrey Smith for Mike Wallace, and that's pretty much the length of it. They let go of LeGarrette Blount. So this is a team that's looking to be as good or if not better than last year. Let's start off with the Eagles fan, AC. Let's hear what he has to say about his team.
Okay, well, I'll go through the offense and defense first before I get into records, because I think schedule is going to play a big part in this, not just the team. First of all, the best offensive line in football is coming back. A very underrated offensive line, obviously. Underdogs, get the dog mask out. Still not getting enough credit. And then you change it up with getting Jason Peters back healthy. I think he's got at least this year left. Steven Wisniewski at the guard. Brandon Brooks was obviously a Pro Bowler. Jason Kelsey all of a sudden was almost going to get cut 3 years ago. And then all of a sudden is playing like the best center in the game. And you have a lot of depth. That's the thing about the Eagles offensive line. If someone goes down, you know, Vaitai was just, I think a 6th or 7th round rookie and just comes in for Jason Peters and plays the whole season and plays against some of the best defensive ends in the league and stops them. And then look at Chance Warmack still there. So like the depth of the offensive line is unbelievable. Receiving core, we lost Torrey Smith, but if you watched Torrey Smith last year, he had a lot of issues. He was our weak link as the receiver. I think you guys disagree with me, which I don't know how, that you think Mike Wallace is worse than Torrey Smith.
I actually think I personally think he's better.
No, me too. But we had this talk when it first happened. Not you, maybe, but it was Mitch.
Torrey Smith was great in the playoffs. That's all I said.
He was good in one game, yeah. He made some big catches in the Super Bowl, 2 catches.
I don't know if Mike Wallace makes those catches.
We thought Torrey Smith was a bottom receiver, so you couldn't get much worse.
No, yeah, I mean, exactly. I think it's an even trade. I just don't know if Mike Wallace has the same clutch trait as Torrey Smith does.
He's been around.
We'll that. I just think during the season, Mike Wallace is going to have more production than Torrey Smith did last year. And hopefully he makes those clutch catches if we're going to come down to those clutch catches. But then Torrey Smith dropped a lot of clutch catches during the season. So I know just because it's in a Super Bowl, it's a clutch catch, but like there shouldn't be a clutch catch when it's the Super Bowl. You should always be able to catch the ball when you need to.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Like 19 games, you want to be there for the whole 19 games.
100%, 100%. So I do think it's not like Mike Wallace is going to get a lot more touches. I just think he's going to be decent. Alshon Jeffrey, to me, is super underrated. I think he's a top 15, close to that 10, 11, 12 range receiver in the league. He doesn't have to do much. He's bought into the Eagles, what they're doing there. You just saw in the Super Bowl that big catch over Rowe there for the touchdown. Like, he came up when he needed to and made big plays. I think the receiving core is going to be good. And if you look at depth, Mac Hollins made some big catches too. He showed that he was sure-handed. We're going to see a little more of Shelton Gibson, who out of West Virginia that was on the practice squad last year. Okay, running backs is a big not issue for me because the one thing I will say, I don't like that it's super crowded this year. Because I do think Jay Ajayi and Corey Clement are going to share like the carries and most of the touches. Obviously, Jay Ajayi is not going to really get a lot of passes, but I do think what we saw from Jay Ajayi in the playoffs last year and in certain times of the game, with this offensive line, you can run a lot of guys. Bringing Darren Sproles back, like I said, a lot more guys in the room. Donnell Pumphrey, who I like, who's very similar to Darren Sproles. It's going to be tough to see if they could even keep Pumphrey with Darren Sproles. But that's going to be a whole different thing. Doug Peterson has showed to be very creative with his plays and getting his good players in positions where they need to be. And it's going to be amazing to watch with Darren Sproles, with Carson Wentz in this offense, with this offensive line. One guy I would like to point out is Josh Adams, because the one thing they are missing because of losing LeGarrette Blount, who I thought was key for the Super Bowl and also late in games during the season, Josh Adams is just a big between-the-tackle running back from Notre Dame, undrafted free agent. You could maybe see him maybe make the team, similar to Corey Clement last year. Our defensive line just got even better, adding Michael Bennett. Obviously, we lost Vinny Curry, but I thought Vinny Curry was actually the weak link last year on the defense side. Very good against the run, but still never really got a lot of pressure. He could get jammed up a lot, get caught in blocks. Obviously, Tim Jernigan, he's injured right now. Elijah Quells played pretty decent. I actually like the thing with Nada, too. He's definitely getting older, but he's still, if he's your third rotation guy, that's when Nada is going to play better. He doesn't have to play all game anymore, right? Like he's probably max going to get what, like 20 snaps a game, maybe 25, if that. Josh Sweat, the big guy from Florida State, he's going to get some snaps. And Derek Barnett is going to be unbelievable this year, in my opinion. I think he's going to take a big step and prove that, you know, after it was Garrett. I think he was the best defensive end in that draft class. We go to linebacker. Bradham and Hicks, I think they can stay on the field the whole time because we don't mostly just play nickel anyways. Hicks being back is huge because I do think it's going to be a make or break season, not for Hicks, but he was injured last year, and he's shown that he can be a top middle linebacker in this league in certain places, but he needs to have a full season. And Nigel Bradham, to me, underrated. And then you still have a lot of guys like Joe Walker played a lot of middle linebacker. Nathan Jerry played some last year. They picked up Corey Nelson from Denver. I don't think linebacker depth is going to be a problem. If you get a lot of injuries, it could be. And then obviously the weak link, if you could even say it's a weak link, is obviously their secondary. Jalen Mills being a 6th-round pick from LSU and all of a sudden, you know, having huge plays in the playoffs, and he had the pick 6 against Minnesota. I think he takes another level. Ronald Darby showed flashes, but then sometimes was brutal. So I'd like to see how he plays. And then Sidney Jones finally healthy. It's going to be interesting to see if he can be what he was supposed to be coming out of the draft. Obviously, a lot of depth there. Raju Douglas. Look at Avonte Maddox, the guy they picked up from Pittsburgh to be a good little small slot corner. So all in all, with that being said, the Super Bowl champs, I can't be a homer because I look at their schedule, and for me, it's just about get in the playoffs and win the division. I think they do that being 11-5 because they have a very tough schedule. I think they do unbelievable at home. They don't lose a lot of games at home, but at the end of the day, I could see them, you know, losing to the Rams in LA, losing to the Saints in New Orleans, losing to the Jags in Jacksonville, and then maybe even losing to the Vikings at home.
That Jags game is in London.
Oh, in London. Okay, so they're like very away. And then I could see them mixing in an NFC East loss in there as well. So that's why I'm going 11-5, but I think it's good enough for the division. And I'm all about I think this team has the pedigree. Just make the playoffs, show some promise during the regular season, and in the playoffs, you know, under Doug Peterson, they're 3-0 and won a Super Bowl. So just get to the playoffs. They have a tough schedule, but I think this team has so much talent. And, you know, I talked a little bit. I didn't about the quarterbacks. I think Carson Wentz is going to be healthy. Let's see how he changes. But at the end of the day, we've seen what happens when we have a backup. So hopefully he is healthy, and I do think he's going to continue that MVP level. He's going to be tough to stop. If he does get injured, we know we have a guy that can come in and throw for 400 yards plus against the defending champs at the time.
AC, would that be the 3rd or 4th seed in the NFC?
I think it may. I guess I'll go 3rd, yeah, because I got 2 other teams above them, so yeah, they'd be 3rd.
Okay, I just want to make sure that was.
But I do think they could be better. They could lose those games. They could win those games too. So I think it anywhere could be 13-3. I'm just going 11-5 because I think everyone's going to give them their best game, and we're going to find out how they're going to do when that happens.
Yep.
All right. Step up to the plate, Dilly Vanilli. What do you think of these Eagles?
In terms of receivers, Alshon Jeffrey was, like AC said, bought into this piece of the Eagles, was kind of the decoy for the first half of the year and made his catches when necessary. I'd like him to step up a little bit more and at least get more prominence in the Eagles offense this year. Mike Wallace, like we just talked about, I think is an upgrade from Torrey Smith because you can't get much worse than Torrey Smith. And Nelson Aguilar gets all the credit in the world from being absolutely awful in 2016 to getting the bounce back here in 2017. Offensive line is very, very good, if not the best in the league. Zach Ertz, at minimum top 5 tight end, can be even better. Sometimes you question as number 3. QB, you got the situation with Carson Wentz and Nick Foles. Nick Foles obviously going to be a good communicator with the rest of the team, and then Carson Wentz did phenomenal until his injury. I think he can come back and play very well. Jay Ajayi had his moments in the second half of the year with the Eagles, made some very big touchdowns, some good plays, and also love that Corey Clement gets in this offense. So this offense is very stacked with some good players. Defensively, the defensive line is loaded, especially with Nada being the 3rd piece, like AC said. If that's going to be your 3rd piece, I know he's very old, but just to have that veteran presence even for 1 year is good. Derek Barnett made the clutch play in the Super Bowl as a rookie. Good stuff for him. Want to see him do some stuff here in 2018. Fletcher Cox, one of the best in the game. Brandon Graham, very good as well. Nigel Bradham, not as high as AC, but I still think he is good. Jalen Mills, as a 7th-round pick in 2016, doing as good as you could possibly do in this position. Malcolm Jenkins, we've seen a lot of him, made some big plays. Ronald Darby, I think, like AC said, was one of the questions I have coming into 2018. They really pumped him up as a very talented cornerback, and he is. But in 2017, that's what it was all talked about. And then when he came back from injury, he wasn't the standout that we thought he was going to be. So I want to look at that. Then I also want to look at Sidney Jones, the guy that in the 2nd round we thought was going to be a steal when he's had his injury problems. He looks to be, starting cornerback this year, or at least 3rd guy. So I want to see what he can bring to the table, if anything. And overall, this team is still got most of its pieces that it had in 2017. Most of them are pretty safe. LeGarrette Blount is gone, but you still have depth at the running back position. And Darren Sproles is back for one last season, so maybe he'll get some good plays in there as well. Overall, I think this is a 12-4 team, just one more loss than last season. Incredibly difficult schedule with some big teams, and I think teams are going to be wanting to beat the Super Bowl champions, of course. That's like their biggest priority. So in order to do that, the Eagles are going to have to come out strong and play some very competitive games against teams like the Saints, the Rams, the Vikings. Those are big teams in the NFC. I feel like they're going to lose 1 game within the division and then 3 of those games against some of the bigger teams in the NFL. So it should be interesting to see what the Eagles bring, if they can continue the dominance that they had in 2017. That Carson Wentz is going to be back to 100%, all that stuff, and continue to show what he did in his MVP-like season last season. So I got them at 12-4, which has me putting them at the 3rd seed.
Yeah, to me, we've covered the talent of this team ad nauseum here very well. Strong offensive line. Pro Football Focus has the Eagles' offensive line as number 1. Their defensive line overall is one of the strongest in the league. And their secondary, I think, is pretty strong. Linebackers maybe not as strong. But to me, the way I look at that, I think to me, without question, I look at the entire NFC East, and I see that the Eagles are far and away the more talented team than anybody else there. So it's a foregone conclusion, in my opinion, that the Eagles are going to win the division. I think it's like one of my 3rd foregone conclusions that they're going to win the division. So Then I'd have to put them against the other teams that I have potentially finishing first. And I think, to me, it comes down to the Eagles and the Saints. And I also have the Eagles at 12-4, but I have them as the second seed. I think that game on the 18th against the New Orleans Saints, I think, will be a key game. I just think there's a couple of areas that I see the Saints a little bit stronger than right now than the Philadelphia Eagles. But I think overall, in comparison to talent, I think they're still really strong. I mean, I guess we can question the secondary after they did not have the greatest defensive performance in Super Bowl history, but they still won, and that's fine. The way that I look at the NFC is there's two elite teams. It's the Saints and the Eagles. No. I think some good teams like the Vikings and the Rams are in the good level. To me, it's going to come down to basically a coin flip between the Eagles and the Rams. And I think that you could legitimately make an argument either way that either one of them is better. And I think you could take it down to schedule. And I think it's going to come down to the November 18th game in New Orleans. So those are 12-4 and the number 2 seed in the NFC.
Okay, for me, just a couple areas you guys did not cover, as I've been doing throughout the series. Head coach, Doug Peterson, I don't think gets enough credit for how good he was last year. It's going to be interesting to see if his methods, his offensive schemes carry over to year 2, with the RPO being such a big thing for defensive coordinators and people talking about around the league. If that is still going to translate as well as it does, or if he has a few other wrinkles to add to it to make it even better. So that's a big question going into this year, but I believe Doug Peterson is one of the top 10 coaches. Offensive coordinator. Obviously, they lost Reich and DeFilippo, who was also coach there, quarterback coach. Now they have Mike Groh, I believe. This is how you pronounce his name. He was a wide receiver coach in Los Angeles and Chicago. He was a wide receiver coach last year. Usually, I do see that wide receiver coaches, for whatever reason, do translate better to offensive coordinators. Don't know why that is, but it seems to be a trend throughout the best offenses in the league. So we'll see how he does. Obviously, he has at least a year in that system. I think AC, you guys talked about the offense and defensive lines are the strengths of this team. That's what wins them the games. That's what won them the Super Bowl. Just in terms of highlights, I think Alshon Jeffrey will have a bigger season than last year. I think he'll be healthier, and I think he'll have more touchdowns. Running back position, I think Jay Ajayi will be the primary back. I think more so than AC believes. And I think Corey Clement will kind of come in and spell him, and Darren Sproles will be sort of a gadget player. I think because he's older and coming off an injury, he won't be playing as much. I'm interested to see how their tight end situation works out, if they play more 2 tight end just with the rookie there, because they played a lot with Trey Burton, but we'll see what happens this year. Jason Peters at left tackle, even if he's not the same, they still have Vaitai behind him, so I'm not really worried about that. Secondary is interesting just against top-tier passers. Obviously, Tom Brady did have a field day against them for the most part, but they didn't really play a lot of top-tier passers last year. So I want to see that on their schedule this year just to see how their secondary performs. I do think that their safety depth is a tad bit of a concern outside of their strong and free safety, McLeod and Jenkins. And I'm interested to see who steps up as their third linebacker. But those are all depth things. As a starting roster, they're one of the top 3 in the NFL. So I'm not really worried about that. In terms of a record, I think the Eagles are once again one of the better teams in the NFL. I think they will finish second in the NFC, and I think they're going to finish at 11-5. I actually think a lot of teams are going to be very strong in the NFC, so I think that's going to make for a lot of competition. They have a tougher schedule this year, at least in my opinion. They play the Falcons, Vikings, Panthers, Texans on the road. They play at home. That's at home. Then on the road, they play the Rams, Titans, Jacksonville, in London, and New Orleans. So those are all games that I think are going to be tough, but they should survive at least most of those and make it out to 11-5. So I think the Eagles are going to be an elite team once again, and once it comes to the playoffs, they'll be in the conversation. So we'll wrap it up there for the Eagles, Super Bowl champions. What do you guys think? Are they going to be a repeat champion? Are they going to be in the conversation, or are they going to fall off after winning the Super Bowl? Let us know in the comment section below. Hit that like button and subscribe for more Bottom Line View. Peace out.